you ever notice that a lot of narcissists tend to act the same way? Maybe you've been with several toxic people and you've noticed different traits. I know a lot of times people ask, like, where do they figure this out? Do they go to like narcissist school or something like that? Like, how is a lot of times very, very similar from person to person, regardless of personality? Like, wait a second, this seems very, very similar. If you guys are new here, my name is Ben Taylor. I'm the founder of Raw Motivations, the creator of the Narc app, your guide in the 45-day clarity challenge, and a self-aware narcissist on this channel to provide awareness, growth, healing, and change. Subscribe for more. When we're talking about this, we're talking about the aspect of like, hey, a lot of narcissists do the same exact thing. You're like, okay, well, sometimes they have different personalities, sometimes they look different, sometimes they act different, all different aspects of that. But at the core, a lot of times we see some of the same habits, some of the same differences, and some of the same motivations that's actually happening on a day-to-day basis. Maybe you've been with a covert narcissist or a overt narcissist or a vulnerable or a closet or like however you want to describe them, all different types of narcissists that are grandiose and that are very vulnerable and hidden. Like the different types of narcissists still have the same core issue. They still have the same things deep down inside that is making and changing and morphing a lot of these things to be in an abusive relationship. My goal today is to try to help you see what is at the core of narcissism, like one of the core problems with it. You know, and it's hard to be able to identify it for some people because they look at narcissism like, they don't have a problem. Like, what do narcissists actually have? Yes, they're mean, abusive assholes, okay? But like when it comes down to it, like it doesn't look like they have a problem because they're leaders in society. They're leaders in the business place. They are, the millionaires. They're doing all these different things. And you're like, wow, these people look really narcissistic. Or this person in my life is successful in this area, but not in this area. Like a lot of times it's like, I don't see a big problem. They're with the next person. They seem to be doing great. They seem really confident. They seem really accomplished. Like what is actually going on and where does that problem actually stem from? Well, the thing you have to understand first off is even though a lot of times narcissists don't look like they have a problem, like sometimes they look like they have it all together to society, narcissists do have a problem underneath, and that goes back to their sense of self, that goes back to insecurity, goes back to love and self-care. You see, a lot of times people think that narcissists are infatuated, obsessed, and are in love with themselves. Because it seems like it, right? Very egotistical, very like high-minded of like, I'm entitled to the different things. Like I'm entitled to this, very arrogant about that, not really caring about other people. It's all about like them. And sometimes people get confused thinking that that person is in love with themselves. In reality, that's not true. In reality, a lot of times there's a lot more different things going on than being infatuated with themselves, but more oftentimes of being infatuated with having a mask, with having an image of how they think or how they want to appear to be to society. You see, when it comes down to it, a narcissist doesn't have proper self-love or self-care because they're not willing to address the problems. They're not willing to be honest with themselves and start to deal with the problems and start to deal in different ways to help other people and to help themselves grow, heal, and change. When it comes down to it, narcissists a lot of times are very insecure. Insecure of having a solid sense of self, whether that's being enough, whether that's having a sense of worth, like whatever that might be, that insecurity piece is a huge aspect that gets triggered really instantly. For me, a huge aspect of the insecurity was like when someone would give me criticism. Someone might be coming alongside and being like, hey, you need to work on this a little bit better, or you need to focus on this, or hey, here's something that you missed. Instantly, I'd be like, whoa, like that's an attack on me. I'd retaliate, I'd justify, I'd blame someone else. All those different types of things because I didn't want to hear or feel that like piece there was I'm insecure about what I've just done and this person's now attacking me. You see, a lot of narcissists struggle with having a sense of self. Maybe you've heard me reference it as being like the idea of like the void, of there being like a black hole inside me of like, I can't fill this up. Everything I keep trying to do, everything I keep trying to fulfill, everything I keep trying to go towards doesn't make me feel better. It leaves me feeling empty. And as a result, I have to put up a mask to make it seem like to everybody else that everything's okay when it's actually not. So sometimes that confidence piece that you see is completely the opposite. They just don't want you to see that. They don't want that insecurity to show of like, hey, there's something else that like I'm missing that I don't understand, that I can't figure out, that I don't know what it is, that I can't fix. There's a lot of different aspects of that insecurity piece, sometimes going back to sense of self. You see, a lot of times a narcissist will use others to help prop up a false sense of reality. And so, like, for me, like, I would want others to validate the reality that I'm experiencing. Like, hey, this is my reality. This is the mask that says I'm a good person. Now I can go and do all this stuff and hurt people, but when it comes back to it, like, I'm a good person. Can you validate that for me? Like, I want someone else to be like, oh yeah, like, that person's a good person. Like, that's what I'm putting out there. Because I want to make sure that I don't look bad. And being able to use others to be able to validate that mask helps me feel less insecure. Helps me feel more like, oh yeah, that's who I am. Identify with that more than the stuff that's actually inside. And the hard thing is, like, that insecurity can stem from a lot of different ways. I speak from my perspective a lot of times, but sometimes that insecurity is going to stem from different types of abuse or different types of neglect or different emotions that didn't get processed. Like, there's different insecurities that lead to this, and there's different insecurities that narcissists struggle with, different personalities that bring in different insecurities to the table. Well, when we're diving into those insecurities piece, the one thing that is a huge trigger of that is guilt. Now, normally when I say guilt, people are like, narcissists, they don't have guilt. Okay, they do, but it is a very minute and a very quick aspect of, like, I'm feeling this, I got to get away from it as fast as possible. You see, guilt sets it off, the insecurities a lot of times. Narcissists have guilt, but the thing that's different is it's very quickly compartmentalized or hidden or kind of like pushed to the side. For me, like, the aspect of guilt, like, brought out, like, aspects of, like, pain, of, like, I don't want to experience this because of how painful it might be. Sometimes the illustration is, like, if you have a pot of water on the stove and you're accidentally doing something, you accidentally stick your hand in the pot of boiling hot water, you're going to jerk your hand back out. Like, that's almost the feeling of, like, that guilt of, like, I need to get away from it as fast as possible. I can't handle it. So as a result, I don't process it. I compartmentalize, I push it away. I make sure that I get past it, get through it, get away from it as fast as possible so I don't have to deal with the guilt that I'm feeling about whatever it might be. It might be that insecurity, it might be the mask, how that doesn't look to who I actually am. It might be something I've done. All these different types of pieces pull out guilt. The guilt is the aspect that comes out and says, I did something bad. And that brings out insecurity, that brings out stuff that, like, I'm like, wait a second, like, I can't handle that I did something bad because what I'm believing, what I'm putting out there, so I appear more secure, is something that says, hey, I didn't do anything bad. So I couldn't say, like, hey, I did anything wrong. Like, no, I'm good. I'm a good person. Okay, because guilt is the idea of says, I did something bad, which leads to, for a narcissist really quick, of shame that says, I am bad. Reveals even more insecurity of, like, hey, it's not just that. It's not just I did something bad. It's not just I messed up here. It's I did something wrong. I hurt someone. It's like, no, like, that is me. That's my core. That's who I actually am. I am that awful person, and I don't want to acknowledge that or admit it because it doesn't match up what I'm projecting, what I'm putting out there. And sometimes that shame comes from the past. Comes from different abuse, different things that happened to that person. Sometimes it comes from different types of trauma. Emotional, mental, physical trauma. Sometimes it has different things that are linked to of, like, hey, this looks like shame in my life because I didn't have a chance to be able to process what it actually was or what it actually developed into. Oftentimes that shame piece is the idea of, like, hey, this is here. I don't know how to deal with it, and it feels shameful to be honest about it. So I'm going to hide, compartmentalize, push it to the side, whatever I need to do to avoid dealing with that guilt and dealing with that shame. When we're diving down with insecurity, with guilt, and with shame, the other one that I wanted to highlight and talk about too is the idea of rejection. Oftentimes how I phrase this is rejection has little ties into BPD. And you've got narcissists that are running away from shame. You've got BPD that is running away from abandonment. And oftentimes the thing that kind of connects them at times is rejection. Like, the idea of one of those primal emotions of, like, hey, I don't want to be rejected by another person. I don't want another person to invalidate me or to make me feel bad. And oftentimes that rejection pulls out guilt and shame about me. It pulls out guilt and shame when I look at someone and I'm like, oh, that person looks better. I feel rejected because of that. That person, like, makes more than me. That person does whatever. And, and all different things like this, like, feels like, okay, there's aspects of rejection, but then you've seen it in the relationship when you try to go out with friends. And all of a sudden, the narcissist is like, oh, I can't believe you left me. You abandoned me. You rejected me. And I can't believe you told me you didn't want to be with me anymore and you rejected me. That is the ego, the entitlement, like all those different pieces that I'm trying to project out there of like, hey, I'm this good person that would be a catch to be with. Like that's the idea. The thing is, I want to be able to avoid those feelings. I want to be able to avoid like that rejection piece. And so as a result, I'm going to do anything I can to avoid the insecurity, the guilt, the shame, the rejection. And as a result, it produces these defense mechanisms that oftentimes are very hurtful and destructive to others. This is where you see a lot of times the narcissists blame other people. And see the narcissists rage out at other people, attack, gaslight, manipulate, because it's all in the idea of like, I have to be able to get away from this. The reason why you see a lot of narcissists that act the same exact way, covert, overt, different personalities, doesn't even matter, is because they have the same driver underneath. Those insecurities, the guilt, the shame, and the rejection that is compelling a lot of things underneath the surface to make them respond in the way that they're responding. And until they get to the place of saying, hey, I can acknowledge the guilt, I can acknowledge the shame, and I can start to actually process and work through it in a healthy environment to grow, heal, and change and develop, nothing's ever going to happen. If you resonate with some of these and you want to hear more about this, but also to start your process in that healing, I want you to go to claritychallenge.net. It's a great way to be able to engage with a 45-day challenge of logging in a systematic process to move forward out of toxicity into a healing state and to work with other people in the community that are going through the same paces at the same time with you to help you find your clarity of who you are after that abuse. If you like what you see here, please subscribe for more. Thank you all so much and have a great day.